Today we're going to be talking about the Birthplace of the Vile GM. I wanted to get this and Lightblade out of the way because they're the two new strikes, and a lot of people are going to be going for their Gilded day one, so I want to do the new strike today, and then we'll do Lightblade tomorrow, but I will do all 6 GMs in case anybody's curious, so if you want more GM content, just, hit that sub button, the notification bell. Alright, that's enough selling out. We're done. Let's move on. So, first up, I just want to talk about classes real quick. Or actually, I don't want to talk about classes, and what I mean by that is, essentially, I'm going to stop just telling people 18 things to recommend for characters. You can clear this on any character, Warlock, Titan, Hunter, it doesn't matter. Obviously, there is a preference, or at least my preference, and if you're curious of that, I prefer Warlock or Hunter. Either one can clear all 6 of these GMs in a very, very balanced fashion, or even an overpowered fashion. And I think Titans are just weaker than the other two. That's it. There's no other reasoning. But like I said, all 3 can clear it. That's up to you, player preference. But if you give a damn about my small recommendation, Warlock or Hunter. Particularly, you're going to go with Void most likely because this season we have Overload Nades, and Overload Nades are on. You got it, Void. Although I will give a small shout out to Stasis. Moving on, let's talk about other stuff, character stuff out of the way. First up, you should use pulse rifles over hand cannons. Now, settle down. 95% of the time, I would say hand cannons. But in this particular Nightfall, I'm going with pulse rifles. Here's why. First off, obviously, pulse is the only other alternative to hand cannons. On top of that, this strike has a lot of rooms where you walk into the room immediately, and then suddenly there are a ton of Scorn stalkers, crossbow snipers, whatever you want to call them, that are in the distance that can easily shoot you and kill you on sight. And if you have a hand cannon out and you're not running a sniper, you're gonna die. Or you're just gonna waste heavy ammo like linears and galley and stuff on just regular, orange bars, red bars, and that's just not efficient or effective, in my opinion. So, given that you put on a pulse rifle, you have something to combat these guys with distance and range, as opposed to a hand cannon that you'll be doing like 3 damage when you hit them in the pinky toe each time. On top of that, you obviously can stun the unstops still with a pulse rifle, so that's a given. And then you aren't locked into being forced to run a sniper rifle or like a linear if you don't want to. I will say, though, you should be running long-range weapons in general for this particular GM. I think that'll just work out better in the long run, given that most of the strike you want to be at a distance. Not only are there Scorn stalkers and crossbows and all that, but obviously there's also a ton, and I do mean a ton, of Screebs in this Nightfall, so you don't particularly want to get close to any of the enemies to begin with, but range can go a long way, no pun intended here. Other than that, Div is basically your only consistent solution in any of the GM Nightfalls this season, because it's the one constant thing that will guarantee a stun for Overload champions in the game. I know they fixed SMGs and autos, but they're still just inconsistent in just the fact that they take a couple seconds to stun. And then you might have to reload because half your clip was gone, and then it's just a mess. Now, I will say Overload Nades, obviously, on hit, will connect and stun the champions. The key words there is on hit, because if you miss, well then, you're screwed. And then you have to recharge your nade, or you might already be dead, and it's not going to look great. So, obviously, yeah, if you have a nade for every single Overload champion and you hit every single nade, then you'll be fine. But outside of that, and risking that, a Div user in your fire team will just go a long way in shutting all of them down immediately. Obviously, you can still run Overload Nades, you can do Div and Overload Nades, but I wouldn't suggest going into this Nightfall with just Overload Nades or an AR and SMG, God forbid. Now, we talked about not getting close to the enemy. Now let's talk about getting a little bit close to the enemy. Lucent Finisher in the game this season is obviously a great tool to use. So Lucent Finisher is essentially Aeon Finisher, except this works on champions. And guess what? You can actually run Lucent Finisher and Aeons if you really wanted to. I think in most cases it's overkill, but hey, if you want double brick drops, you can go right ahead and use it. But you should be using this on every, I would say, unstoppable champion in the Nightfall. You don't have to go for every single champion in this Nightfall, because there is a ton of them. I feel like overloads you should just stun with Div and immediately kill and not risk them surviving, and then them having that invulnerability of 5 seconds where they're not stunned, but they also can't be stunned. They just spam GLs at you until you die. So, just kill them. And then for unstoppables, you can easily stun them. You know when they'll be stunned. You know when their little antlers glow. And then all they do is really just kind of, you know, walk towards you very angrily with a mean face. And then you just stun them again, and then you kill them. So those are much easier to actually finish and get ammo off of. So in that regard, just kill overloads and stun the unstops and get ammo off of them. Now in terms of weaponry, I will recommend a couple of things. As always, you don't have to use these exact same things. You can just use some of them, or maybe you just have your own personal loadout that you want to use. And yeah, so recommendations. Let's start at the top. I think in the top slot, you probably want to have either Agger's Scepter or Arbalest in your arsenal. Now, while Agger's doesn't particularly stun anything in this Nightfall, Agger's is still an absolute goddamn monster in Grandmasters every single season since it's been released. It freezes everything, it can nuke certain champions. Hell, have you seen this thing as an anti-barrier champion? It will obliterate it, no problem. Anyway, moving back. So Agger's is really, really good at crowd control. It freezes up the enemies. In this particular case, it freezes up all the Screebs that may be surrounding other Scorn enemies. So let's say you kill one of the shield boys, and then there's like 5 Screebs around said shield boy. They'll all freeze, and they won't start chasing you, and God forbid they would spawn baby Screebs. Those would get either instantly nuked or frozen as well. Now Arbalest, on the other hand, no, there's not any barrier champions in this Nightfall, but Arbalest can serve a purpose still, given that it does decent damage, and if there's any shields that give you trouble for whatever reason, Arbalest can just strip those shields off nice and easy. Now, it's not to say you can't use anything else in this slot. You could totally use something like a Succession as a sniper in this slot, and then if you want, you can go something like Gallahorn in the heavy slot, which is totally fine. Galley is pretty good for this Nightfall. I'm not going to go outright and say it's the #1 MVP 100%, because people testing on Master before the GM's actually been out is not really indicative of it translating and being just god tier in a GM. At least not most of the time. So, I'm sure Galley will be good, but I don't know if I'd call it god tier. But if you still want to go Sniper Galley, that's totally fine. It's up to you. So we've already covered that you should run a Pulse Rifle. In your second slot, this is where I would run my, I guess, my primary weaponry. I'm going to just name off some Pulse Rifles that are good in the game that if you happen to have in your vault, you should run. But, quick side note before that, if you should, for whatever reason, decide that you want to run an SMG or an auto, Funnel Web is probably the go-to, just because it's extremely accessible. It's obviously really, really good. And it'll just be helpful in the Nightfall for general ad clearing, even as you're taking 2 clips to stun an Overload champion. And then for autos, honestly, I'm just going to say Gnawing Hunger. Gnawing Hunger, I know, is not in the world drop pool in the game currently, but I imagine a lot of people who have gilded their Conquerors and have multiple gilded Conquerors have been playing the game for quite a bit, and they probably have one sitting in their vault, just chilling. So that'll be my recommendation. If not that, then Summoner. Summoner's in the game currently, not hard to get. There you go. Now for Pulse Rifle, there's actually a few you could be using, so I'm just going to start naming them off, and, you know, if you happen to have any of these, it will be a good choice, in my opinion. First off, Graviton Lance. It's an exotic, yes, but if you're using, let's say, Reed's Regret in your heavy slot, then you're free up on an exotic, and Graviton Lance would be perfectly fine to use for something like this. Now, you have Darkness Before, which drops in Prophecy, in case you were curious. Also a solid Pulse Rifle. Then we have the old Crucible Pulse Rifle, Stars in Shadow. Very, very solid. It's Solar Affinity, so you would have Void Solar Arc there as options. Also, another decent one would be the one from Banshee, which is Agma PR6. A solar weapon as well. And it can roll a Adrenaline Junkie demo roll, which is pretty neat. If you happen to have one, I would recommend you try it out. Then, if you happen to not have Darkness Before and you don't want to farm it, you also have the option of using Insidious, which is the current Pulse Rifle from the raid Vowed Disciple. Whether you have a good roll or not, that could be an arc option if you want to go arc. And of course, there is the raid exotic Collective Obligation, which is Void. And I would say it's not really a beginner-friendly exotic weapon to use, just to utilize its effectiveness with its perks. But if you just want like a generic Void Pulse Rifle in your arsenal and you don't want to use Graviton Lance, there's your option. Finally, we arrived at Heavy. So, for Heavy, I mentioned Gallahorn earlier. Like I said, it's a solid choice, but I don't think overall you're really going to want to have Gallahorn, just for the sake of it having limited ammo. I know, Lucent Finisher's a thing, but here's the idea, right? So Gallahorn, while really effective, you're not going to have unlimited ammo at all times unless the Nightfall just goes absolutely perfect for you. You finish every champion that you possibly can, and you're just spamming Gallahorn at quite literally every group of ads that spawns at you. If that works for you, sure, cool, great. For me personally, if I'm going to have a div player in my fire team, I might as well just run precision weaponry, including in my heavy slot, just to maximize that more, because obviously I will have more ammo in something like a linear fusion than I would in Gallahorn. So in this case, I'm talking about either Reed's Regret, which is the best heavy in the game, basically, as far as I'm concerned. Something with, like, auto-loading Fireline, triple tap Fireline, maybe triple tap Vorpal. Or you could try using Cataclysmic, which is the new linear fusion from Valve Disciple. It is a solar linear fusion that can roll with 4 times the charm, and then adaptive munitions. If you don't know what that does, it's basically the anti-match game perk introduced in this season. Essentially, it does normal damage to other shields that are not solar, so it comes in pretty handy. Either of those will be fine, in my opinion. And before anybody asks, yes, you can totally use Sleeper still. It's a viable weapon. I just figured Reeds and Cataclysmic is probably the hot use these days, and pretty accessible given that literally as I'm recording this, Trials is going on for Reeds right at this moment. Anyway, that's what I got weapon-wise. As always, you can use whatever the hell you want, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever gets the job done. But those are just some of my preferences, and that's it. Now, as far as rooms in this Nightfall go, particularly, most of the rooms are just normal fighting. You enter the room, kill the ranged enemies, then work on trash mobs and the overload and or unstop in the room. There are some rooms where you can do a couple things to kind of mitigate getting killed. So first off, the plate rooms, which are going to be basically the one plate where a bunch of creeps spawn around you, and then the second room where there's going to be 2 plates for you to cap. The idea is you stand on the plate, enemies spawn around you. So in the first room, if you notice, you can actually hop on the boxes that are surrounding the plate, or at least have 1, maybe 2 people hop on them, and then 1 person in the circle. And then just have people spawn killing the Screebs or Scorn. What are the small Scorn guys even called? Like, they're Stalkers and then helmet-looking jabronis. Let's go with that, alright? So, just stand on the boxes, have maybe like an Aggers, maybe some sort of anchoring weapon that gets rid of them nice and quickly, and that's how you basically mitigate dying in that room, standing in the circle. Obviously, of course, you could just stand on the plate and then get off the plate as soon as you start seeing enemies spawn, kill all of them, then get back on. That's totally fine too, but you could choose fast or you could choose slow, whichever one you want. Now, the second room is going to be a little different. The idea is still the same. You get on the plate, enemies spawn, kill enemies, but in this room, you're actually going to be dealing with champions. Now, essentially, in this room, you want to have somebody being on the lookout for the enemies. So, somebody gets on the plate, and then one or both people that are not on the plate start spawn killing the enemies as soon as they spawn in. Ideally, you're probably going to have to throw a overload nade into any of the waves that you see spawning, because overload champions, or, you know, you could prep the div if you want to run div, that's cool too. And then, if you have Aggro Scepter, in this particular instance, you just freeze one guy, and it freezes all of them. Essentially, just buying you time, helping you kill stuff much, much quicker, and then capping the plates without, you know, heavy breathing everywhere. You can do this for both plates, and then nice and calmly just cap the plates and get the hell out of there. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, the rest of the Nightfall is pretty self-explanatory and pretty easygoing, other than the fact that you have to kill enemies. It's just kill champions, kill wave, move forward, kill enemy, kill champion, kill wave, move forward, get to the bridge, kill champions, then kill the 2 giant yellow bar jabronis guarding the temple, and then you're at the boss. Once you get to the boss, guess what? You kill enemies, then you shoot the boss, then he teleports you, then you kill enemies, then you shoot the boss, then he teleports you again, then you kill enemies, and can you guess what you do this time? You kill the boss. He's dead. He's fucking dead. Alright. That's it. Honestly, after you get past the plate stuff, it's smooth sailing. I think this Nightfall isn't like the hardest thing in the world, but I do think some people are also underestimating it, thinking they're just gonna cakewalk through it in like 5 minutes, you know? So, I would say keep a lookout at least for the plate section, and then you can start breeding a little easier. But other than that, if you follow these steps, or at least some of these steps, I think you should be fine, and knock it out of the park, nice and easy. Now, Light Blade boss room, that's going to be a little more complicated. We'll see about that. that'll be tomorrow. Okay, but for the time being, that's it. Get you guys tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed. Hope this helps. You know, like, share, subscribe. It really does help the channel. #ad. Also, streaming on twitch.tv/SneakyBeaver. I'm going to be doing GM helps probably all week. So, see you there. All right. Peace.